Recession, a word that sends chills through markets, governments, and households alike. But are we truly on the brink of a global economic downturn? Or is this just another cycle in the ever-changing economy? To answer this, we need to take a closer look at where we are now, what's driving economic trends, and what lies ahead. To understand if we're heading towards a recession, let's start with the current state of the global economy. Inflation rates have been soaring across the globe, fueled by supply chain disruptions, geopolitical tensions, and lingering effects of the pandemic. Central banks have responded by hiking interest rates to cool down demand. The logic is simple. Higher borrowing costs discourage spending, easing pressure on prices. But here's the catch. Higher interest rates also slow down economic growth. Take the United States as an example. The Federal Reserve has been raising rates at the fastest pace in decades, signaling its commitment to taming inflation. Europe, the UK, and other major economies are following suit. While this policy may curb inflation in the long run, the short-term effects are undeniable. As borrowing becomes expensive, businesses hesitate to invest, and consumers tighten their belts. This creates the perfect storm for a slowdown. First, let's clarify what a recession is. In simple terms, a recession is a period of economic decline where GDP contracts for 2 consecutive quarters. But it's not just about numbers. Recessions are marked by rising unemployment, reduced consumer spending, and declining business profits. And the human impact can be devastating. Families feel the pinch as job losses mount, investments shrink, and the sense of financial security evaporates. So, are there signs that we're heading towards a recession? Absolutely. Economists track several leading indicators to predict downturns, and many of these are flashing red right now. One major indicator is the yield curve inversion. In a healthy economy, long-term interest rates are higher than short-term rates, reflecting greater risks over time. But when short-term rates surpass long-term rates, the yield curve inverts. This has happened, and historically, it's been one of the most reliable predictors of recessions, forecasting nearly every U.S. recession in the last 50 years. Another sign is declining consumer spending. Retail sales, a key driver of economic activity, are showing signs of slowing. Inflation has eroded purchasing power, forcing people to prioritize essentials over discretionary items. With consumer spending accounting for over 2/3 of economic activity, in countries like the USA, slowdown here spells trouble for businesses. Adding to the woes are weak corporate earnings. Major corporations are reporting declining profits, and some are even resorting to layoffs to cut costs. The tech sector has been hit particularly hard, with giants like Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft announcing massive job cuts. These layoffs, while isolated to certain sectors for now, could spill over into the broader economy if the downturn deepens. But it's not just domestic issues driving this narrative. Global geopolitical tensions are playing a significant role. The war in Ukraine has sent energy prices soaring, particularly in Europe, which is heavily dependent on Russian oil and gas. Supply chains that were already strained during the pandemic have been further disrupted, leading to shortages and higher costs for businesses and consumers alike. Then there's the issue of deglobalization. Countries are adopting more protectionist policies, prioritizing domestic industries over international trade. While this might benefit some local economies in the short term, it limits the growth potential of export-dependent nations and adds friction to global markets. Less trade means less economic activity, plain and simple. However, this looming recession might not look like previous ones. Why? Because of the labor market? Despite the gloomy outlook, unemployment remains historically low in many major economies. Even with layoffs in certain sectors, others, like healthcare and hospitality, are experiencing worker shortages. This creates a strange dynamic where growth slows, but employment remains relatively stable. Another wild card is emerging markets. While developed economies like the US and Europe may struggle, countries like India, Indonesia, and Brazil are experiencing rapid growth. Younger populations, Increasing urbanization and technological adoption are driving economic expansion in these regions. Emerging markets could act as a counterbalance to the stagnation seen in developed nations. So, can a recession be avoided? That's the trillion-dollar question. Central banks face a delicate balancing act. If they raise interest rates too aggressively, they risk triggering a full-blown recession. If they're too cautious, inflation could spiral out of control. Fiscal policies, like government spending on infrastructure, healthcare, and social programs, could provide a buffer, stimulating demand and supporting growth. But governments face their own constraints, particularly high debt levels that limit their ability to spend freely. Now, you might be wondering, what does this mean for me? Preparing for economic uncertainty is crucial, whether a recession officially materializes or not. First, prioritize building an emergency fund. Aim to save at least 3 to 6 months' worth of living expenses to weather any financial storms. Second, limit unnecessary debt. High-interest loans and credit card balances can become a burden during tough times. Third, focus on long-term investing. Markets may be volatile, but history shows they tend to recover over time. Let's address the elephant in the room. Are we truly heading towards a recession? The truth is, no one knows for sure. Economies are incredibly complex, influenced by countless variables that are impossible to predict with certainty. Some experts argue that the global economy is simply transitioning to a slower growth phase, not a full-blown contraction. Others believe that the warning signs are too strong to ignore. Regardless of the outcome, it's important to remember that recessions are a natural part of the economic cycle. They bring challenges, yes, but they also create opportunities. For businesses, recessions can be a time to innovate and streamline operations. For individuals, it's an opportunity to reassess priorities, develop new skills, and build financial resilience. Ultimately, the question isn't just whether we're heading into a recession. It's about how we respond to the challenges ahead. Will we rise to the occasion, finding ways to adapt and grow? Or will we let fear and uncertainty hold us back? Only time will tell. What's clear, however, is that the choices we make today will shape the economy of tomorrow.